Wait, turn this camera. No. We need it most higher.
Yeah.
Just one more book would be.
Should I get my laptop?
Okay, turn this camera.
रीना मैम हेलो।
हाँ नवीन।
रीना मैम आवाज आ रही है?
हाँ आवाज आ रही है आपकी।
हेलो।
या यू कांट हियर मी? नहीं है। यू कैन। हेलो नवीन।
He should be able to.
Let me call him. But how do you know that?
I'm checking the camera.
So supposing she's standing away.
Yeah, visible. लैपटॉप पे सर फोन पे लेके आप तो लॉग इन प्रॉपर उससे ऑडियो का इश्यू है वो हॉरिजॉन्टली है.
And if my phone rings or something, nothing will happen, na?
Depends.
Should I put it on? Huh? It might. Should I put it on flight mode?
No, internet access.
हाँ.
See, if you pick a call,
हाँ.
it will be.
अच्छा, but वैसे अगर कॉल या मैसेज आए तो कुछ नहीं होगा. ठीक है.
हाँ, okay.
Am I audible at the back? Something correct. Good morning, everybody. On behalf of the Women's Development Cell, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished guest, Dr. Shivani Nag, and all our friends here today. Today's session with Dr. Nag on consent in intimate spaces is part of an important conversation that the WDC has sought to mainstream in the last few years. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce our esteemed guest, Dr. Shivani Nag. Dr. Nag has a PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi. She currently teaches at Ambedkar University, Delhi. Her areas of expertise encompass a wide range of subjects, including linguistic diversity, linguistic human rights, and multilingual, multicultural education, feminist pedagogies, cultural psychology, and qualitative research methods. Additionally, Dr. Nag's scholarly contributions extend globally as she was invited as a speaker during the 12th session of the UN Forum on Minority Issues held 2019. Her impactful work has been extensively published in prestigious journals such as those affiliated with the Tata Institute of Social Sciences and the European Journal of Educational Studies. Before we begin today, we would like to invite Professor Reena Ramdev, the convener of WDC, to say a few words.
I don't need to say anything. Just a very warm welcome, Shivani. And we're all very excited, and we're all here full house to hear you talk. And just a big thank you also to the WDC team. You guys are always sort of fantastic with every event that you organize. So yeah, over to you, Shivani. ये वाला mic better रहेगा. Yeah.
So very good morning to all of you, and it's absolutely a pleasure to be here. And I really hope that, in a few minutes from now, we can make it more interactive. I'm comfortable both in English and Hindi, so we can make it bilingual. But sometimes in the flow, if I forget to switch and you feel you would want me to translate or switch to the other language, just feel free, right? So we can try and keep it as bilingual as possible. So without, postponing it any further, I'd also want to start briefly by reflecting on what we chose to organize this workshop around, right? So of course, it's the idea of consent and also idea of consent in intimate spaces, right? And I remember in my conversations with Gina, when we started talking, we were also thinking about, that this is not to assume that all of us already understand what consent is, what harassment is. It's a constant process of learning and unlearning. Things that earlier as a student, I would have not necessarily identified as an intentional harassment. It's only now that I'm able to look at it and say that I perhaps need not have given that much of benefit of doubt. It was clearly violating of a space, and the person should have known better, right? So in journeys of our life, these are not things that we often talk about. There still continues to be a lot of silence around issues of sexual harassment. And why intimate spaces is also because, one, of course, that understanding and negotiating consent in the relationships that we come to form, we often forget that it's a everyday process of understanding and negotiating, right? और जब हम बोलते हैं कि कंसेंट हर दिन आपको समझना पड़ता है, उसको सीख करना पड़ता है, by negotiating, I don't mean it to sound like a process of bargaining, right? But how do you do it sensitively with a concern for the other, right? There are also apprehensions कि इससे पूरा वो आपका एक romantic process कितना mechanical हो जाएगा अगर हम रोज पूछ के will seeking permission, asking for consent, talking about it, take away from, say, the spontaneity of being in love, right? Or will it kill the moment? So there is desire, you want to act on it, there is consent from both sides. And then the process of talking about it, there can always be this concern, that what if it just kills the moment, right? So those concerns are there that, we don't always think that it is something that has to be talked about or thought about actively. Also because intimate spaces, where even, sometimes we forget how much the risk is for women when they say yes. To what are they saying yes? We keep talking about, and judgment after judgment and movements after movements. People have tried hard to establish that anything other than a clear yes is a no, right? And people also wonder sometimes that when why do we make? Why is it difficult for women to say no or yes? And because the experience tells you that your no also doesn't count, and your yes also invites judgments, invites certain risks for women, right? Which actually makes negotiating spaces difficult for them, right? And in intimate spaces, a lot of times, I'm just, it might look a little rambling at this moment, but I hope in due course of time, some dots and threads will begin to get connected. जब हम intimate space में consent की बात करते हैं, right? कई बार जब हम बोलते हैं कि this is better. जब हम बोलते हैं कि एक ऐसे रिलेशनशिप में जहां पे आप कंसेंट से हैं, राइट, जहां पे आपका एक वॉइस है, वहां पे कई बार कोई क्लियरली ना क्यों नहीं बोल पाता कि उसमें क्या ही है, वो बोल ही सकते थे, अगर नहीं बोला तो हमको लगता है इतना स्पेस था कि अगर ना बोलना चाहते तो बोल देते, बट उसके अराउंड जो बहुत सारी चीजें बिल्डअप हो रही है, यू नो, a very, if I were to give you an example for it, talking to a young university student who says that, at 2 at night, if I'm at my friend's place, right? And I don't, the point is not whether I can say yes or no. अगर ना बोल के फिर वो इंसान एंगेज ही करना बंद कर दिया और बोला कि नहीं, ओके, यू किल द मूड, नाउ गो बैक. At 2 o'clock, I don't know where to go back. So I don't know if saying no is an easy choice that I can make. I'm also thinking through that I'm not at my place. I'm at another person's place. We've talked about something, right? And now when I say no, will this person tell me, okay, fine, I'm respecting your no, but abhi chale jao is time pe. Because I'm feeling a certain way, your no is making me feel bad. I don't want to, not hear it. But at the same time, then it's too difficult for me to be in the same room with you. So what does a person do in that? So it's not like कि हाँ और ना बहुत simple चीजें हैं. उसके around उस time पे क्या exist कर रहा है? आप उसके around अपना कोई एक support system imagine कर पा रहे हैं या नहीं कर पा रहे हैं? Thinking about one case that got a lot of attention in past few months, the Shraddha Walker case. And I remember thinking about it and feeling extremely disturbed. Not because, just the part of hacking and brutally cutting somebody up makes you feel it's so distant. But if I look at the lives of the two people, they are uncannily very close to you. These could be your friends, these could be you, right? In a context where maybe a woman has had to pay a price for exercising her choice of whom to love, which here is coming at the cost of family or family support, right? आप अपने शहर में भी नहीं है, आपको बोला गया है अगर आप इस इंसान के साथ हैं तो फिर आपको family support नहीं मिलेगा. You move out into a completely new city. उसमें भी कोविड टाइम है जो आपको शायद बहुत समय नहीं देता है कुछ बहुत अच्छी दोस्ती बना पाने का. उस सिचुएशन में where you don't, maybe I don't mean to speculate, but one doesn't know what the financial condition was where even if moving out was an option at that point of time, right? In those situations, how do you think about, आप खुद अपना yes or no कैसे process करते हो? What do you think? So when we say, negotiating, understanding consent, it becomes important to see also the context in which those conversations are happening. And then irrespective of which gender, how we identify ourselves in terms of gender and sexuality, how do we humanize the other and that situation that people feel comfortable कि हाँ अभी yes or no इसी moment पे इसी चीज पे बोला जा सकता है without it involving a lot of other things, without, so how to, so when I'm saying how do we understand consent in intimate spaces, it also means how do we facilitate it for one another to be able to say our yeses and nos the way they should be said, the way we are feeling at that moment, right? Are we, making it a matter of कि, I know कि अगर अभी ना बोला तो कभी दोबारा बात नहीं होगा. मैं ये नहीं बोल रही हूँ कि बात करना ही करना है, उसमें भी कोई मुझे ना बोलेगा मुझे बुरा लगेगा ही. हो ही सकता है if I really like somebody and the person doesn't feel the same way about me, I may want a distance for my own healing, right? But how do we articulate those concerns without guilt tripping one another? Because there is so much else that happens in that space that what seems so simple to understand, what seems कि इसमें दिक्कत क्या है बोलने का, हम नहीं realize कर पाते हैं कि वो दिक्कतें कहाँ से आ रही हैं. So before we move further into those conversations of understanding consent in intimate spaces, I think a few things I hope we are clear about, or we will become clear about, is that if a yes has not been said, it means a no, right? और no को measure करने का कोई मापदंड नहीं. There is no decibel, there is no कि कितनी देर के लिए कितने conviction से बोला जाना चाहिए. There is no parameter that exists on basis of which you can say that a no is a good enough no or not. The only thing that is consent is an active yes. An absence of no is not a yes, right? And as you know, once that becomes clear, that unless it's a clear yes, assume it's a no. We don't have to be mind readers here, right? I mean, a lot of times, it feels like I have a mouth, I will speak. जब मैं बोल रही हूँ, then don't look at what my body language is telling you. There's a lot of faff that exists in the name of pop psychology, which is extremely misleading, right? How much I'm leaning into you, it just could be because I मेरे को लग रहा है मेरा आवाज बहुत धीमा है, आप तक नहीं पहुंचेगा, मैं आपकी तरफ झुक रही हूँ. वो आपके तरफ एक सेक्सुअल इंटरेस्ट है, रोमांटिक इंटरेस्ट है, ऐसा कोई फिक्स्ड उसका आइडिया नहीं, राइट? मैं हंसती हूँ, मुझे बहुत जल्दी हंसी आ जाती. If people started thinking that my laughing or my smiling is an indicator of interest, then there could be lakhs of people who would think I'm in love with it. I like laughing, I like being happy, I like smiling, right? I find innocent things amusing, right? So all of us would feel far more respected and far more humanized, right? If somebody was to just walk up and ask, okay, is this what you feel? Rather than trying to guess. And I'm a psychologist. I have years of training in psychology, including clinical psychology. There is no such manual that will tell you whether somebody is interested in you or not. And when you're attracted, the fact is, it happens with all of us. आप रात को पढ़ रहे हो, you have an attraction, you have an infatuation, you're falling in love. उस समय पे जो गाना बजता है, आपको लगता है आपके लिए sign है. That's God trying to tell you that yes, what you're feeling, this is. हिंदी फिल्म्स के आधे से ज्यादा सॉन्ग रोमांटिक सॉन्ग्स है. तो अगर कभी गाड़ी में बैठोगे और सोचोगे जो तीसरा गाना बजेगा वो मेरे लिए हिंट होगा, तो मान के चलो कि maybe 90 out of 100 times the third song that will come will convince you that you're in love, and whoever you believe yourself to be in love with, that person also responds. Right? All of us have that, we all have some of those biases when we are not neutral people, right? If I like somebody, of course, I watch them more than every smile. Everything becomes a hint that is trying to say something to me, right? So just know that a lot of that goes around in the name of how do we try to make sense of people's body language and so on and so forth, could be absolutely misleading. There is not a lot of research to back it, right? So one doesn't have to make sense like that, right? When you want something, you will find signals and signs that will tell you to go for it. And that can happen irrespective of what you might be interested in. Right? So it's always, and as a psychologist, I think one of the important learnings were that and that's a humbling sort of a learning, that you can't actually know people without their consent. I cannot know you against your will. I can know you only in the process of you being able to trust me enough to open up in front of me. Right? The only way I can get to know you better is if I'm able to establish a certain trust where you feel I will not judge you, where you feel you can be yourself with me, where you can feel unfiltered. There is, you feel that even if I may not agree, I will be able to voice it without rejecting your personhood. Then that creates a space where some form of knowing can become possible, right? So there is no other way of knowing somebody just through some random associations that we make between what our, facial expressions or body language would look like, right? So a whole lot of faff there. And also, if you see the kind of communication that the media tries to give us. So, and sometimes it makes me wonder, that we also believe what is convenient for us. Right? So there are a whole lot of, again, movies and across countries. I mean, that's not just something specific to the kind of movie industry and, the media that exists in India, but across. You will have a lot of these situations, where there is a woman, she is overworked. वो बहुत सारी चीजें कर रही है, she is getting tired, she is getting frustrated, वो अपना पैर पटक रही है, बहुत सारी चीजें कर रही है, and there is a man who's listening, who's watching, who's feeling concerned but not doing anything. Right? And when she finally has that moment when she breaks down or she gets triggered, right? The simple thing is, and she says, nobody seems to be helping me around. The same man would say, but you didn't say anything. मैं तो बैठा ही था, मुझे लगा तुमको मदद चाहिए होगी, मैं माइंड रीडर थोड़ा ही हूँ. आपको मदद चाहिए थी, आप एग्जॉस्टेड फील कर रहे थे, बहुत सारा काम था, आप बोल देते, मैं कर देता. मैं वहां पे बैठा हूं और आप मुझे बोल नहीं रहे हो, तो मैं तो यही समझूंगा ना कि आप खुद कर लोगे. मेरे को कैसे पता? Right? So there's a whole lot of literature, those pop literature that exists that will tell you that, women don't say what they want. उनके दिमाग में कुछ चलता रहता है और वो clearly बोलते नहीं. Right? और इसीलिए समझ में नहीं आता है. So when it comes to sharing responsibility, sharing work, right? Then we feel कि अरे मदद चाहिए तो साफ बोलो ना. हमको कैसे पता लगेगा आपके एजिटेटेड चलने से कि आपको मदद चाहिए. तो जहां पे आपको एक किसी प्रोसेस में कंट्रीब्यूट करना है, वहां पे जब तक कोई सामने से आके मदद नहीं मांगता है, हम उसको गिरता हुआ भी देख रहे हैं, उसको स्वेट करते हुए फ्रस्ट्रेटेड भी देख रहे हैं. Unless a person asks up front, we don't see that the person may need our help. लेकिन हम में इंटरेस्टेड है, हमें बिना बोले समझ में आ जाता है. वहां पे हमको कोई डाउट नहीं रहता है कि सामने से आके नहीं बोला. Right? So I'm struggling. I need somebody to probably pick up a load with me, help me with the kind of chores that I have there. Unless I speak, you will not understand. Right? But when it comes to my interest in you, then I don't have to say anything at all. Suddenly everybody becomes mind read. So that's a place of a lot of misplaced convenience, where what suits us. So we believe narratives based on what suit us. Right? When is it okay to talk directly and know what the person wants? And when it is okay to not have to go through that process of reaching out and just make sense from whatever signals that there may be. Right? And if any narrative is getting formed on the basis of what's convenient for me, right? Then the fact is I've already lost a sense of other in that. Right? अगर जो मैं सोच रही हूँ, जो मैं मानती हूँ, वो मुझे क्या सूट करता है पे उसका आधार है. तो वहीं पे, and at the end of the day, when we are talking about consent, the word becomes important because we are talking about two human beings with agencies. There is a concept in psychoanalysis, right, where we say that, when a child is born, a human child almost experiences a sense of omnipotence. Right? The world revolves around the child. The child is absolutely egocentric. अभी egocentric से भी पहले egocentric है जैसे मुझे दिख रहा है वैसे सबको दिख रहा है. ये तो जब कोई उस तरीके का बहुत अभी cognition आया भी नहीं. Right? Some of you may like to read his work. The psychoanalyst is Donald Winnicott, and largely what I'm going to say is from this theoretical framework he developed on object relation theory. Right? So where he says this human child, it's an extremely narcissistic experience of some sort. Not that the whole world is there only to take care of. You don't have to think about anybody else. आपको भूख लग रही है, आपको नींद आ रही है, you want to drink water, you want to relieve yourself, all you have to do is let out a shriek and a cry. And it is the responsibilities of those around you to not just fulfill what you want, but also to first figure out what exactly you want. Right? आप क्यों रो रहे हो आपको समझाने की जरूरत नहीं. वो आपके आसपास के लोग अपने हिट एंड ट्रायल से आपको उठा के 10 चीजें ट्राई करके फिगर आउट करेंगे कि आप पेट में दर्द था इसलिए रो रहे हो, नींद आ रही है इसलिए रो रहे हो, भूख लग रही है इसलिए रो रहे हो, नापी गीला हो गया है इसलिए रो रहे हो. You go figure, the child will not try to make it easy for you. उसको रोना था वो रो दिया. You figure out and make sure that things are taken care of. Right? So everything, or I may be simplifying it a bit much, but for that child, everything around is an object that exists to meet the needs of the child. Right? And when I say everything around is an object, it's like, this chair cannot refuse me and say that I don't want to be sat upon by you. That's an object. Right? Unless somebody owns it and says कि ये मेरा कुर्सी है, आप इस पे नहीं बैठ सकते हो, तो आपका एजेंसी है. इस चेयर का कोई एजेंसी नहीं. ये मेरे को चेयर से पूछने की जरूरत नहीं है कि क्या मैं आपके ऊपर बैठ सकूं, या मेरा वजन आपके लिए बहुत ज्यादा होगा, आप टूट जाओगे. Will you be able to bear my weight? The chair can't say that to me. Right? It's an object. If I want to consume a pizza, I have money to buy it, I can consume it. The pizza can't say, but I want to be eaten by that person, I don't want to be eaten by. That's what an object is, right? And for a human child, everything around is an object like that. But growing up, becoming human, is also to realize that those around us are not these objective objects there solely to fulfill our needs and desires and wants. That those around us are subjects with wants, desires, feelings of their own. Right? So if a 2-month infant screams at night, right? Nobody will guilt trip this 2-month-old saying, देखो इसको कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता कि माँ इतना थक के अभी सोने गई. Right? हम नहीं expect करेंगे. We will not shame that infant for doing it. But if at 20 years of age you're doing the same thing, रात को 2 बजे क्योंकि नींद आ रही है, अगले दिन एग्जाम है, तो you'll just scream and expect that whoever is there, your mother, father, whoever is there at home must get up, irrespective of what their schedule looks like the other day, and make that cup of chai for you. Then you're actually dehumanizing them by reducing them to those objects. Right? So life somewhere is also this journey to realize that I have needs, wants, I'm a subject who feels, who thinks, right? The other from whom I expect is also a subject. So my relationship to that other, who's a human being, who is also a subject, who has desires, comfort level, discomfort levels of their own, my relationship to that cannot be the same as it is to any object. Right? I mean, that needs to be somewhere at the core of how do we interact with other humans. Right? And इसीलिए हम बात करते करते careful होते हैं कि कहीं बुरा ना लग जाए. Because we know that it's not an object. It's another human being with feelings, with concerns. And you'd want to make sure that, they feel comfortable too, right? Or at least they feel respected as a human being. So if this is the core, then that core, this understanding of each other as human beings, right, with choices of their own, will have to somehow be, an important foundation of how we relate to human beings across relationships, right? It doesn't just then have to be romantic, intimate relationships. In any relationship, I would be mindful of the fact that the other that I'm talking to, I'm responding to, is not an object, is a very alive subject. So then what should be the way of my interaction? This is not to say that we don't say what we feel, but we do think about how do we say it. No? Or then if I feel angry, if I feel disagreement, I do a lot of times feel that, okay, I will express my disagreement, but I will also present the logic of it. Right? So that to make myself comprehensible to that other person. Right? So if we can imagine this as a core, it allows us to talk about consent better and going beyond just what constitutes sexual harassment or not. And in that, the laws that we have, while important, also fall short. If we were to talk about consent only through the framework of, say, what we have in the name of prevention of sexual harassment at workplace, it will also make the conversation very constrained, because then we are not, we will not be able to even talk or address the fact that we all identify with different genders and sexualities. Right? There have been versions of prevention of sexual harassment acts that some universities, made following Vishakha guidelines, and that's another thing that would be useful for all of you to search and read about. This whole idea of why why there exists a WDC. Why do you have internal complaint committees and cells in institutions? Is because one realizes that these are spaces in which consent can get violated. Also because these are spaces in which power is very asymmetrically distributed. That's part of the structure. Right? So, as a teacher, I can try and say I'm very friendly, I'm very democratic, and all of that. But to say that and to start believing it would actually be being dishonest. मेरे हाथ में आपका grades है, आपका attendance है, वो power तो है ही, right? And that does put us in very different kind of a relationship, right? So at workplaces, because there is a very non-symmetrical distribution of power, so some power relations are also important for those institutions to be able to function. In that space, जब intimate spaces में जहाँ पे दोनों हाँ ना बोल सकते हैं, वहीं पे consent के बारे में बात करना इतना मुश्किल लगता है. How much more difficult it would become when there are also other kind of power relations, right? Where you're also thinking, will no come at the cost of a promotion? Will no come at the cost of selection somewhere for some scholarship? Will it come at a cost of me not getting as much time from my mentor or PhD supervisor as some other student is getting? If all those thoughts start affecting or shaping whether you're able to articulate what you really feel, right, then there is a space for exploitation. Right? There is a space where people may not be able to say what they actually want to say. Right? So would be a good idea for everybody to look at Vishakha guidelines, because that's how, for the first time, the country in late 90s started talking about, sexual harassment at workplace. It took us many years from then to finally have an act in place, which also, like I said, there is a lot to it, but there is also a lot that could still be added. Right? And going beyond that, like why this mention of power was important is that in intimate spaces, whether we like it or not, power still exists. Right? Institutions में चाहे workplace हो, it's a relationship between an employee and an employer. It's a relationship between a student and a teacher, a research scholar and their supervisor. वहाँ पे हम power को देख पाते हैं. It's very overt. It's very clear. It's institutionalized. It's very clearly written up. Right? In intimate spaces, also we come with all that goes into shaping us: our gender, our class, our caste, all that forms our context. ऐसा नहीं है कि हम उसको कभी भी completely अपने बाहर रख सकते. Right? And even if I want to keep it out, doesn't mean that the other doesn't perceive it as such. It's like somebody saying, no, मैं caste को नहीं मानता. आपके नहीं मानने से उसका ना privilege आपसे कोई वापस ले रहा है, ना उसका discrimination आपसे वापस ले रहा है. Right? जब आपको caste का privilege बहुत बार आप actively seek out करते ही हो, कौन caste use करता है humiliate होने? वो आपके मानने नहीं मानने से डिस्क्रिमिनेशन नहीं आ रहा है. And if you don't know, they say, if you don't know your caste for the longest time, then assume that you must be coming on the side of privilege, क्योंकि आपको मिल रहा है, आपसे कुछ छिन नहीं रहा है, तो आपको realize ही नहीं हो रहा है. Right? उसी तरीके से बहुत सारे जो power structures exist करते हैं हमारे society में, right? उस space में अभी हम equals हैं. Of course, we try to be equals, but that again has to be a lot of effort, everyday negotiation, everyday conversation. It doesn't happen automatically. You can, a man can make me feel, I treat you as an equal, but I see, okay, this is a bulky 6'2". If this person tries to push me, what is it that I can do? Right? It's not just about you saying it. It's also how it gets received. और उसमें भी आपका बहुत सारा cultural conditioning रहता है ना. Sometimes we also get offended very easily, to be able to have this conversation. Sometimes it's also important that, if you're coming from the context of privilege, absolutely it is possible and it happens, and we all meet people, well-meaning people who actively want to dissociate from that privilege, or at least who don't want to constantly be reaping benefits of it. But having said that, that can't make you that can't put you in a position of very moral self-righteousness. Right? अगर मेरा class, मेरा caste, मेरा gender, मेरा sexuality उस जगह से आ रहा है जो dominant है, जो उस समय का majority है, right? Then the fact is, I belong to groups which have made others feel vulnerable, right? And if you've been made to feel vulnerable by n number of people coming from a certain location, we are likely to then think of our safety first. Right? When, for instance, ये बहुत सारा होता है, not all men. Of course, many of us who've been part of even women's movement, we've had some amazing men in our lives, right? But you also know that, once your trust gets violated, or there is any other kind of violation that happens, it takes a lot to be able to heal and trust again, right? And when I'm trying to protect myself after an injury, a deep moral injury, physical injury, all kind of injuries, I will probably look out for myself first, right? So if I say right now I'm not feeling comfortable with you, it's not about you at that point of time, right? And it can't be मेरे बारे में ऐसे कैसे सोच सकते हैं, right? मैं तो इसको भी नहीं मानता, उसको भी नहीं मानता, मेरे बारे में कैसे सोचते हैं? आपके बारे में है ही नहीं. There is a person who's recovering, who's healing, who's looking out for themselves. it will take them time. They don't know you enough, right? And if they don't know you enough, given your context, it is understandable that they can have apprehensions, right? And in those moments, the only way a trust can be established is if you're also if you don't push it. मेरे को सही समझना is more important than your well-being. उस pause के साथ आप थोड़ा रह पाओ, right? Give them time to heal. If your presence is making them uncomfortable, sometimes it's not about you, right? We also tend to make everything about, मेरे को reject किया. Somebody cannot want to be with me. That doesn't have to become a evaluation of me. It doesn't feel good, but there may also be somebody about whom I don't feel reciprocally, right? So if I expect them to understand that, no hurts, but relationship and, desire is not the only place where you hear no's. So, this is also, and here again, it's important to think about power, right? हम कब ना सुन पाते हैं और कब ना बर्दाश्त नहीं होता. I don't think anybody here would be somebody who's never had to hear a no in their life. कि मेरा मन नहीं है कल एग्जाम में आने का. Please permit me not to come and still get a grade. Or I don't want to come tomorrow. Please allow me to write an exam the third day. Prepare another question paper. Give me the. We hear no's all the time. And sometimes when you're asking this permission, it may not be you're coming from a space of entitlement. There may be something happening in your life, right? But the institution is unable to understand it. Or it doesn't have the infrastructure or the resources to do something, even if it does understand. So we hear no's all the time. Aapka chutti deny hona, you want something. It's not like we are not used to no's in our life. Then why are some no's so difficult to hear? Right? Is it because we feel that how can the other say no? When I can feel hurt by, I mean, मुझे कुछ भी चाहिए कोई मुझे मना करेगा क्योंकि मुझे चाहिए था, मुझे मना किया, मुझे बुरा लगेगा. Right? लेकिन बुरा रिवेंजफुल हर्ट में कब बदलता है? राइट? जब मुझे कोई चीज मना होती है, बुरा लगता है, लेकिन अगर आप ये याद रखो, बट आई एम नॉट एंटाइटल्ड टू गेटिंग इट ऑल्सो, then that no hurts, but it doesn't become something that will scar me for my life. I like it, I wanted it, but I can't have it. Okay, so I feel bad about it, but I live with it. Right? So if you can't hear a no, if no troubles you so much, right? It's important to think, why is it troubling you that much? क्योंकि आपको लग रहा था आपका हक है हाँ सुन पाना, आपको लग रहा है कि किसी और को हाँ बोला तो मुझे, फिर वो कहीं और जा रहा है. Again, you're not seeing the other as an equal human being. Otherwise, वो ना इतना मुश्किल नहीं लगता. That's, I'm not saying you'll not feel hurt, but what makes you vengeful and angry and enraged about a no? If it is not coming from a space of entitlement, if it is not coming from the space of, if I want it, then it doesn't even matter who the other person is. And if that is what your assumption of the other person is, then the other person is doing a very smart thing by saying no to you. Right? Because, I mean, if we see consensual relationships as relationships where, there is a beauty in meeting of that desire, then I would find it very difficult to feel that pleasure or to feel good about fulfillment of a desire with a person who thinks he has an entitlement to my yes. फिर तो कोई आपको समझ के ही ना बोल रहा. So before I open this conversation to also how it is, how do we understand consent in intimate spaces? One is, when we are talking about consent, it's not just for it's not just a procreative or a penetrative sexual activity, right? Consent begins right from how somebody feels with my handshake or my touch or my asking them out, right? तो बहुत बार कंसेंट ऐसी चीज नहीं है जो सिर्फ एक फाइनल एक तरीके के ही सेक्सुअल एक्टिविटी पे मैटर करता है, right? How we are with even the fact I can't force you to talk to me, right? As a teacher also, the fact that you've chosen to enroll in a course means you came here to hear, right? तो यहाँ पे आके अगर आप बोलोगे कि मेरे को आपको नहीं सुनना है, I can say okay, go out, but then you don't get the attendance for that class because there is something that you actually consented and actively agreed to by signing up for becoming a student, right? Once you're out of this space, right? I may want to talk to you, but you're within your rights to say, but मेरे को नहीं सुनना है, तो आप force नहीं कर सकते हो, right? तो consent तो हर चीज में मायने रखता है. So it's not just about one kind of sexual activity, and that's important to understand, because when you are in intimate space with somebody, right, what we, physical intimacy can be of several kinds, right? It's not just sex is not the only physical intimacy that you will have. It can be hug, it can be just cuddling, sitting close to one another, holding hands. In all of it, consent counts, right? So, and again, I don't know, there is a popular video available on YouTube. Some of you may want to look at it. It's a 2-minute, 50-second video where they use tea as a metaphor for talking about consent. Right? आपके घर में कोई आता है, you ask them whether they want tea. And if they say they don't want tea, it's not a good idea then to force them to have it. Right? Or if they say they want to have tea, but while you're making the tea, they decide कि अब मन नहीं कर रहा है. Right? कई बार होता है कि आपको लगता है भूख लग रही है, but on certain days, if I'm too tired, even the smell of food can become nauseating, and then I don't want to eat once it's finally made. Wasted, you feel bad, आपने effort डाला था, वो सब किया, पर अब किसी को नहीं पीना है, आप उनको जबरदस्ती नहीं पिलाओगे, right? अगर कोई अपने होशो हवास में ही नहीं है, तो फिर चाय पिलाने नहीं पिलाने का मतलब ही नहीं होता है. This video is helpful, though sometimes I wonder how helpful in Indian settings, क्योंकि यहाँ पे अगर आप एक बार चाय के लिए पूछोगे, सामने वाले ने मना किया, आपने दोबारा नहीं पूछा, then you'll be told, you didn't ask them well enough, right? So we have, we also have certain kind of conditionings where we feel that you need to keep asking, right? And consent, I've realized I may sound as if I'm rambling, but consent does become difficult to understand in our society because we are not, not encouraged to say yes or no as it is. Right? बहुत जल्दी और इस पे, another person whose work is very, very interesting on how, we learn very early in life not to hear our own voices. There's a psychologist by the name of Carol Gilligan who writes about ethic of care, about listening. तो कितनी बार हुआ है बचपन में कि कोई आया है आपके घर, उसने आपको चॉकलेट ऑफर किया, and your parents will tell them I don't eat it, I don't like it, right? आप ये नहीं बोल सकते मुझे नहीं चाहिए क्योंकि मम्मी ने मना किया. आपका मन है, आपको खाना है, you're excited about the fact that somebody is coming home, and somebody coming home would mean some goodies for you. You want them, you like them, but you're told that the polite thing and the correct thing to be is to say no, I don't want it. Right? तो एक तो बहुत सारा हमारा, जब हम एक दूसरे के साथ किसी भी रिलेशनशिप में आते हैं, दोस्ती ही सही, ये constantly खुद को remind करना पड़ता है that we also come from spaces where saying yes is not easy, right? And it becomes further scary when my no is not heard. I'm scared to say a yes, but where nobody even bothers about my no, then the trust to be able to say yes really suffers. Right? So how do we create those facilitative spaces for one another to be able to say what we want? Right? So consent matters. It's good to ask. You should ask. Wait for a response. Don't push for the response to be what you want it to be. It's not nice when it's not the way you want it to be. Find ways of coping with it, right? You listen to music, you do something, you go out, you want your solitude for some time, but you find ways to work around it. And consent is an everyday negotiation, right? Aaj mera man hai, kal mera man nahi ho sakta. You know, I mean, and again, I realize the irony of talking about it in a country where we still don't recognize marital rape as a criminal act, right? So we assume that once you've agreed to be in a certain kind of relationship, then your yes and no doesn't count anymore. But that's not a very humanizing relationship to be in, right? So it from hand holding to hugging, it's a step further, right? So you know, it's not bad, it's not wrong, and it's good. It's important to ask, okay, is it okay if I hug? Is it okay if I touch? Right? I know there are graded levels of how intimate you become, but at every step, it's important, both people, to know that the other person is willingly moving with you to whatever the next phase of intimacy is. And, you know, even as it sounds, ki wo kitna usko, it'll begin looking like some boardroom where some corporate negotiations are taking place. Actually, it isn't like that. You know, talking to, again, a lot of young adults, you know, people have also said it's nice when somebody cares about my comfort. You know, it allows me to trust. It allows me to enjoy that moment even more, where I know what I'm feeling matters. Right? If somebody is asking you, Acha, are you okay with this? Right? Is this fine? Is this, if you know, you're uncomfortable with it, you can tell. It's not just taking consent, right? Trust gets established in that. You feel cared for as a human, right? And that care, right, should be a core of our relationships. If we are treating each other as humans, I'm not even getting into what kind. It's a stable, committed, it's a one-time thing. You got to be honest about it. But whatever it may be, right? At that moment, it's not okay to dehumanize somebody. And when you don't care about what they're feeling, what they're wanting, then you are dehumanizing. You are reducing them to objects. Or शायद सोच के देखो, you know, it's also nice, no, that if I feel a desire towards somebody, right? I don't know. I mean, I'm speaking for myself here. I may not be speaking for everybody. It would creep me out if I felt that the other person is with me not because they want to be with me. Right? कोई obligation है, कोई compulsion है, उनको लग रहा है मैं बुरा मान जाऊंगी, half-heartedly है. That would make me feel very creepy or very uncomfortable in that whole situation if I feel that, you know, this desire is only one side. What also makes you feel good is the fact, no, that the other person also feels a similar way, or they are in that moment too. Right? Usko nikal doge, then you know, it's almost like me wanting to be intimate with an object. Again, not one, you know, if I can be intimate with an object, no judgment there, but then I know that it's an object. To reduce a human into an object is not right. That is what I'm trying to say, right? So it's not any judgment with how we may want to see the realization of our desire. But no, there is a difference between human beings and objects, and you don't treat human beings like an Right? If you feel you can't treat a human like an object, then maybe it's time to stop, think, let that relationship of what it means to be a human with another human take its due course. And till that time, then maybe you're more comfortable being around objects, be around objects. Right? But you can't be reducing humans to objects, right? And this everyday negotiation of consent, like I said, it becomes important because that also ensures that whatever you're in, right, is beautiful, is fulfilling, is satisfying for both. And if it isn't, there is enough trust for conversation to happen, right? And again, agreeing for one kind, there is no blanket consent. And when I say blanket consent, it means across times, it means across activities. I may be fine with kissing somebody, I may still not be okay with cuddling. I may be okay with one form of a sexual activity, not be comfortable with another. Because I've said yes to one, doesn't mean I've said yes to it for eternity. And it doesn't mean I've said yes to anything that in your mind might be similar to this. Right? And again, I'm saying, one thing that here I don't mean it as a, what do I say? It's not a moral science thing or a very cautionary thing, but in a world that actually struggles to understand love or desire for that matter, right? A world that struggles to see you as responsible adults who can make choices for themselves. Right? बहुत लोग आपको कितने सारे लोग बोलेंगे ना किसके साथ हो सकते हो किसके साथ नहीं हो सकते हो किसके साथ प्यार कर सकते हो डेट कर सकते हो there are too many people already trying to decide that for you, right? So we are also trying to reclaim our choice to love, our choice to desire, our choice to be in a consensual relationship with somebody whom we want without people telling us what to do, right? And of course, the world is waiting for these things to go wrong so that they can say, हमने तो want किया, right? And especially ये वाला responsible, ये वाला risk लड़कियों के लिए बहुत ज़्यादा हो जाता है. Right? As a student activist, I remember sometimes that we were returning late from somewhere, and the fear was not that something will happen to you. The fear was, how do I explain why am I out at 12? Because I knew the questions will come from there. मेरा safety, मेरा well-being उस time पे किसी के लिए count नहीं करेगा. With what happened post the December 2012 rape, and seeing some of the documentaries and a lot of stuff that was written after it, right? The fact is that, and there were people going on and on about how, she was going for a movie which wasn't an action movie or this kind of a movie. This woman went to watch a movie with a male friend who was not a boyfriend by her parents' choice. And sometimes you wonder, but what if she hadn't told her parents? Is it okay then for things to happen to her just because she went out on a movie without telling somebody? Right? There are that many. There are people always trying to tell you, you can't choose for yourself. You can't be you. In that, how do we humanize, take care, be sensitive, that, these choices also become easier for all of us, right? Because there is a far more stricter watch at young people, waiting them to err so that some of backlash comes onto it. So ab har jagah CCTV camera laga, right? I mean, इनको इस तरीके से वॉच करो, ये मत पहनने दो, ये मत करने दो. ऐसे में हम responsibly, and when I'm saying responsible, I'm not even saying it as something that you have to go out of you. If we stop seeing each other as human beings whose choices matter, whose comfort, whose well-being matters, then it becomes a far more difficult battle to fight, right? And lastly, when we are talking about consent, of course, this is again from the legal framework. So when we are talking about consent, consent, like I said, counts only if it is an active yes. A yes given in non-intoxicated state of mind, right? So ideally, if a consent is after somebody is intoxicated, legally it doesn't count as consent. Right? Consent, India में एक age of consent है. अगर आप उससे कम हैं, then the consent legally doesn't count. Right? So if it's a 14-year-old, they may say yes, right? And there is an understanding to that. Of course, there is a battle going on in, whether we reduce the age of consent or not. But imagine a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, और जिस तरीके के power relations exist करते हैं, do they know they can say no to something? Do they know what is happening to them, right? So with that understanding, consent will not count if the person is below the age of consent. Consent will not count if they are not in a correct psychological state of mind. So if there is a psychological condition, again, consent procured or taken in that situation may not count. It doesn't count if you're in an inebriated state, you are intoxicated, and it doesn't count if you have got the consent through force or any form of coercion. Right? I've said कि ठीक है आप नहीं ना बोलोगे तो आपको नौकरी से निकाल देंगे. अब उसमें कोई forceful bodily violation नहीं है. आपने हाँ किया, लेकिन वो हाँ आपकी मर्जी से नहीं आया. I used the power that I have to get that yes. Right? These forms of power we understand, but again in intimate spaces with friends, I have a bigger friend circle than you. We also use those things. मेरे को ना बोलोगे तो फिर और किससे दोस्त बनाओ? Right? In sometimes with student activists it may happen that people feel कि this was consensual, but the person knows you're somebody. Does that if I'm saying no to you, am I saying no with the realization that if I say no to you, and you being a leader of this stature will not mean that tomorrow I will not have that space. कि आप avoid करने के लिए मेरे को अपना political activity छोड़ना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि आप उस space में इतने ज़्यादा हो कि आपको ना मैं कह सकती हूँ, आप मेरा ना सुन भी लो, पर अगर आपको मैंने ना कहा तो कल वो space मुझे नहीं मिलेगा. वो social space हो सकता है, आपके co-curricular का space हो सकता है, आपका academic space हो सकता है. Sometimes coercion also works that way. We create pressure through multiple ways, right? That I know my friends will stop talking to me, right? So how do we make it easier for people to voice consent? I'll stop here, and would be great to hear from you reflections, experiences, and of course questions. Also, if there are, things that one doesn't agree with, or, you feel that it's not getting sufficiently communicated, the logic of it doesn't sound right, and perhaps we should have a longer conversation on it, even, that would be really well. Right. See, one way to think about it, and what I can share here, is some of the insights from women's movements, which have been that, of course, this is a challenging debate regarding age of consent. And one also has to understand in what context are we talking about age of consent. So one is, of course, the whole developmental stage of, late teens, post-puberty, where, children, young teens are exploring their sexuality, right? So do I criminalize two 15-year-olds who saw something and then wanted to see